Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Neighbourhood Justice Centre's Inspiring Others online public lecture. I am Alicia Ashcroft, the Manager for Education and Public Programs here at the Neighbourhood Justice Centre, which I will refer to as the NJC moving forward. The NJC opened back in 2007 and is Australia's first and currently only community justice centre, and is a world first international mentor community court, an honour bestowed on the NJC by the Centre for Court Innovation. The centre is part of a global network of over 80 community justice centres worldwide and sits within Specialist Courts and Programs Division of Magistrates Courts Victoria. Today's session has two focal points. The first is looking at innovation and inspiration at the NJC through the online family violence intervention order application. For the second part, we look internationally at the inspiration that overseas community justice centres have taken from us. I am going to now take the time to make a statement about a content warning. The first topic explored today may be triggering or distressing for some. There will be mention of a particular family violence incident that prompted the Royal Commission into Family Violence. I will now introduce our first two speakers who will present on the Family Violence Intervention Order application. Once they're finished, I will then welcome our international guest speaker, the Honourable Judge Alex Calabrese, to the virtual stage. Louise Bassett is the Manager for Strategy and Innovation at the NJC. She explores and develops new initiatives to identify their potential benefit to the local community, the Magistrates Courts of Victoria, or the justice system overall. Louise oversees strategic planning at the NJC and manages the program innovation team. Her can-do attitude is behind many of the Australian firsts the NJC has brought to life. Louise has been with the NJC for 9 years and previously worked in state government and international development. She'll be followed by Richard Hodge, who's the Senior Manager, Service Delivery and Transformation at Magistrates Courts Victoria. Richard is a service transformation professional with experience delivering a range of strategic reform programs focused on achieving client service improvement, cross-government relationship building, organisational capacity enhancement, and/or cultural acceleration. Richard's passion for social justice reform has taken him to leading positions across the Victorian government agencies as well as internationally. Welcome to you both. Over to you, Louise.
Thanks, Alicia, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this Law Week presentation. So, since its establishment, Neighbourhood Justice Centre has been an innovation centre for the justice system, and that was back in 2007. But by early 2013, we started to see the centre as more of a living lab. So a place where within a defined geographic area, that being the city of Yarra, we could test out new approaches and innovations in the real world. With a court on site, the key justice and community agencies, strong relationships with the local community, and a culture that supports innovation. So the innovations we're interested in, as the slide suggests, those that improve access to justice and people's experience of the system, help us to achieve our goals, and that are catalytic in nature and can be adopted elsewhere in the magistrates' courts or the broader justice system. So the Family Violence Intervention Order online application is an example of an innovation that meets all of these goals. So where did the idea for the online Family Violence Intervention Order application come from? In early 2013, as you can see from the news article there, family violence cases in Victoria were rising rapidly, and people were really concerned about this. For people who were experiencing family violence and wanted to seek protection from the court through an intervention order, they had to apply to the Magistrates Court using a paper form. Around this time, the then Department of Justice and a family violence magistrate asked the NJC if we could create an online version of the paper form. So the paper form itself was lengthy, legalistic, complex, and really written from the system's point of view, written to fulfill the system's needs rather than having users' needs in mind. And when you're filling out forms, need to bear in mind that people who are stressed or experiencing trauma, this can impede their ability to process information and also their short-term memory. And most people experiencing family violence are under extreme stress and may be traumatized in many cases. So we really wanted to turn this situation around, the online form, really reorient it so it was centered on the needs of family violence victim survivors, make it more convenient and simpler for them and more empathetic to their needs. So what we did was a lot of in-depth user research with family violence victim survivors who had used the paper form and testing the online form and its development out with them and comparing it to the experience with the paper form. We made a huge effort to translate legal language into more everyday language, or where we couldn't, by giving examples and tips to indicate what we were seeking from people filling out the form. We also used what we called emotional logic. Family violence victim survivors told us the main thing they wanted to do was tell their story as quickly as possible. They didn't want to be hit by all these administrative questions up front that seemed quite irrelevant to them and their experience. So as much as we could, we designed the online form so they could tell their story first before they got to the more administrative detail. We also saw court staff as users in the system as well. Often court staff can experience a lot of vicarious trauma from their work with family violence. So we set out to make the form better for them as well by reducing the amount of manual data entry they had to do, by automating that so that they could concentrate more on their interactions with family violence victim survivors and providing better customer service. So in 2015, we piloted the online form at the Neighbourhood Justice Centre. And we're going to show a short video now that demonstrates what that looked like.
It can be difficult to reach out when family violence happens to you. But your protection is now one click closer. If you live in the City of Yarra, you can apply for an intervention order using the Neighbourhood Justice Centre's new online family violence intervention form. Applying for protection is simple and secure. Because you apply online, you choose the time and place that suits you. Using whatever you have at your fingertips, tablet, phone or computer. Use the NJC Online Family Violence Intervention Form. You're in safe hands. If you're experiencing family violence and live in the City of Yarra, visit njcforms.courts.vic.gov.au.
I think it's really important with this innovation to give the broader policy and social context to what was going on at the time. So in February 2014, while we were developing the online form, Victorians and indeed Australians more broadly were devastated when Luke Batty was murdered by his father following a history of family violence. And this tragedy led to significant family violence policy reform in Victoria and indeed in Australia, with the state government then forming a Royal Commission into Family Violence. Shortly after the Royal Commission was established, the NJC trial commenced. And in November 2015, we obtained funding from the Department of Premier and Cabinet through the Public Sector Innovation Fund to trial the online form at 3 more sites, so Ringwood, Warrnambool and Portland, and also to improve service design overall from start to finish for victim survivors applying for an online intervention order form. In February 2016, we obtained Commonwealth funding to further roll out the form to all headquarter courts in Victoria. So that's 12 of them. For the rollout to these initial sites, the NJC plus the 3 additional sites, we had an evaluation conducted by the University of Melbourne and Carinish. So the results from that evaluation showed there were much higher levels of user satisfaction with the online form. So you've got the quote there, which we found great in many ways. If it hadn't been online, I don't think I would have applied, but also a bit chilling because it made us wonder how many applications had we missed out on when people didn't have the online option. So our users in the evaluation research told us that they found court visits confronting and sometimes a direct safety risk. So having the online option to them was safer, simpler, more convenient, easier, more private, and to some extent reduce their stress in applying for an intervention order. But bearing in mind that applying for an intervention order is always going to be a stressful event to some extent. We also found greater efficiency from the online form on all counts, which really promotes greater safety for victim survivors. Significantly, if you take that middle row there, the time from applying to the time to appearing in court with the online form reduced down to 5.5 days from over 18 with the paper-based form. So again, that's got a direct link with the safety of the applicants. And I think the big lesson from this is that if you focus on the user experience, you're also improving efficiency for the system. In March 2016, the Royal Commission into Family Violence handed down its epic report into family violence with 227 recommendations, all of which were accepted by the Premier of Victoria. It had a specific recommendation, recommendation 74, about the online application form, recommending that one based on the NJC's online form be available throughout Victoria for all family violence victim intervention order applications within 2 years. So I'll just add a few comments that the Royal Commission made at the time of making that recommendation. So in view of the risk and trauma that might accompany visiting the court in person to complete an intervention order form, the NJC's efforts to provide an online alternative to a paper form are laudable. In the Commission's view, use of the online form should be an option for applicants statewide as a more convenient and secure way to apply for a family violence intervention order. So the funding the NJC obtained from the Victorian and Commonwealth governments was a significant help in implementing this recommendation. But I'm going to hand over to Richard Hodge next, my colleague from the Magistrates Court of Victoria, who will provide detail about how the Magistrates Court implemented this recommendation so that now the online form is available across Victoria to anyone who wants to access it.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today and on Victoria's Family Violence Intervention Order online application form and really the NJC's role in driving that forward. So the Premier of Victoria's adoption of all 227 recommendations resulting from the Royal Commission into Family Violence was the catalyst for the Magistrates Court of Victoria, or MCV, to expand the availability of the Family Violence online application form from those courts that Louise spoke about to accessible statewide, able to be processed by staff from all of Magistrates Court locations across Victoria. That's 51 courts. As Louise outlined, there was an incredible amount of work, an incredible amount of initiative and effort by the NJC to build, roll out and support an online intervention order application form across those court locations to prove there was a need for greater accessibility to an online application form. The research, engagement and solution design work first driven forward by the NJC proved that an online form could work in this context. With the benefit of supporting state and federal government funding the Magistrates Court was able to reinvest in the work of the NJC, improving both the back-end technical robustness of the online form to reaffirm it was ready to accommodate much larger volumes, and the user experience of the application process itself through further user consultations with staff, peak bodies statewide. Further improvements were made to be able to improve the intuitive flow and the structure of the form, bringing greater sensitivity to how certain questions were phrased. This work, of course, was overseen by our fantastic judicial leadership. And I'd like to acknowledge Deputy Chief Magistrate Broughton and Lead Family Violence Magistrate Stuthridge in driving forward this statewide initiative. So early last year, we commenced making an enhanced family violence online application form available across the state of Victoria. As you well know, the world was struck by COVID-19 pandemic, and like many industries, courts were deeply challenged as to how to maintain their services. This online intervention order application channel became relied upon as the primary application avenue for the court, removing the need for most victims to physically attend the court building to make an initial application, as well as removing the need for retyping of applications by court staff from handwritten paper into our systems. Over 17 showcases were conducted to our system partners and peak bodies across all corners of Victoria to drive awareness and adoption of the online form as the most accessible and quickest method of applying for an intervention order. The NJC's incubation of the concept, design and build of the online form meant that the future statewide online application form technical enhancement work commenced from a wealth of knowledge that guided its redesign and build. And as a result of the courage to innovate shown by NJC and the dedication of the broader Magistrates Court to service change, we've introduced a statewide online form which is available anywhere and internet connection is accessible on any device, particularly improving access for those in regional and rural centres. Increased personal choice for victim survivors as they're able to complete and submit an intervention order application anywhere when they are ready, and they're able to swear their application online without attending a court building, reducing the need for repetitive retelling of their experience. Risk indicators have been systematised, auto-identifying and auto-prioritising applications for processing, where details indicate a potential for immediate personal risk to the applicant is apparent. This whole journey from NJC's initial build and pilot to the finished online application form we have today, we've received a great deal of positive feedback. Importantly, from survivor advocates and system partners who have welcomed how the online form has opened up their ability to sit and support victims to complete their application on immediate contact with them. And also by technology adopting court staff and judicial leaders who have welcomed the introduction of modern digitally enabled improvements to our court practices. As you can see, last year, the Family Violence Online Application Form was awarded gold at the 2020 Australian Good Design Awards in the Social Impact category. It recognises the creation of something new or the improvement of existing solutions that meet pressing unmet social needs and improve people's lives. It also received gold at the Melbourne Design Awards in the Digital Government Services category. The Melbourne Design Awards celebrate courage, both the courage of commissioning clients and design professionals. Since mid last year, over 8,000 intervention order applications have been submitted online, including one victim survivor aged 102 years old who was able to successfully apply online. The court is continuing to work to improve the capabilities of the online form with new functionality to be released shortly. Finally, I'd like to close on the importance of the Neighbourhood Justice Centre's commitment and capability as a court service innovator with an unrelenting commitment to pilot service change initiatives. As many of you on this call would know, innovation in courts is not a simple undertaking. It requires commitment, resilience, and leadership. And I look forward to working with the NJC on many future innovations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Louise and Richard. That was really insightful, and you walked us through that whole journey. We will have time for questions with them towards the end, but for now, I will introduce our final speaker today. The Honourable Judge Alex Calabrese is the presiding judge of the Red Hook Community Justice Centre, which was the inspiration for the NJC. A one-judge court in Brooklyn in New York. The Justice Centre uses a problem-solving approach with services to reduce crime, recidivism, violence, and incarceration to produce better results for community, victims, police, court, defendants, and taxpayers. Judge Calabrese advises and presents nationally and internationally on community justice, and he was appointed to the bench in 1997. He has taught therapeutic jurisprudence at NYU and co-authored the ABA treatise entitled Criminal Law and Practice. In 2019, he was awarded an honorary doctorate degree from John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Welcome today.
Thank you, Alicia. Louise and Richard, that's amazing. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. I thought I would just, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be present. I wish I could be there. You have a fabulous country. It's beautiful, and the people are wonderful. And you have a special courthouse with the NJC, and we have a bit of a shared history. So as I've said in the past, the scariest moment of my professional career was November of 2010. And that's when I read the results of the first evaluation of the Neighborhood Justice Center. And those results put facts and figures on what we in the community court movement knew. We knew it anecdotally. We knew it that it worked, but now we can show those facts and figures to the model. And it worked to reduce crime, worked to reduce recidivism, reduce incarceration, and it built trust in justice and also saved money. Why was I nervous? Your evaluation was so good, I didn't think we could come close at Red Hook. Fortunately, we did. And with these evaluations, together, community courts expanded, Alicia, as you indicated, exponentially across the United States, around the globe, about 80 worldwide. I have to tell you, they expand so quickly because they model on each other that it's hard to keep up with. Let's start with the NJC being the world's first international mentor court. And that means what's done every day at that court not only helps the local community in Collingwood, but is a model for courts everywhere. And as a model, then, the NJC is not only making a difference there, but in communities around the world. Let me give you an example. So as part of my jurisdiction, I'm a housing court judge. I do criminal court, I do family court, juvenile delinquency, and I do housing court from the Red Hook houses. And about 92 buildings, 6,600 people, most of whom are low-income tenants who are hit hardest by the pandemic, of course. While visiting the NJC some years ago, I saw their signs about their financial education program, seemed really successful. On returning to Red Hook, I spoke with Amanda Berman, our fantastic project director, who is in charge of services. She designed and started a financial program to help the people out in Red Hook. So we model and we adapted it to our local community. Under our program, we run financial workshops on a regular basis. We refer people to a New York City Financial Empowerment Center for one-on-one help. That center also trains the staff of New York City Housing. The New York City Housing Authority is the landlord for public housing throughout the city, so their workers have an understanding of the tenants' financial issues that they face. We received a grant to provide materials and financial literacy for our tenants. We added questions to our housing intake and wellness checks designed to identify tenants' concerns about their rent calculations, ability to pay, identifying any training questions they may have, educational or employment assistance they may be interested. So we were able to use those financial questions to really expand and find out what their interest is in other services. And you could see how helpful it was to our community for us to build our program modeled after yours. And that was pre-pandemic. Now we have over 40% of our tenants are behind in rent and facing eviction. And obviously you want to bring all the services you can to this group of people, because if you live in New York and you're evicted from public housing, your next step is the shelter system. And it's a terrible system. It's overcrowded, and it's hard on individuals, it's hard on families, it's hard on kids, it's hard on everybody. You don't want people to be evicted from public housing because you know where they're going to end up. And with your financial program, we have the tools in place to help our community go forward as we're moving out of this pandemic. So put simply, your program is going to help Red Hook families keep their apartments and not become homeless. Absolute fact. As we speak, there's so many ways. As we speak, an architect is designing 4 community courts in Canada. The court they're looking to for design inspiration is the NJC. That's because your courtroom is on the 2nd floor. And that makes the 1st floor reserved for community space. It was just ingenious, just absolutely design brilliance. And it's telling the community you are the most important. And your courthouse was designed specifically to make your indigenous population feel welcome. You incorporated indigenous art. You have amazing outreach events. You hired locally, all noted by the people creating the courts in Canada, who right now are trying to figure out ways their courts are going to be able to reach out to their indigenous people. Again, it's your example helping people around the world. Your judge, by the way, David Fanning, is an international expert in this kind of designing program to outreach these populations. And I know the Canadian Attorney General and judges are looking to Judge Fanning and trying to figure out the programming they should put in these community courts, again, to relate to their local communities. In Queens, New York, right now, they're designing a community center. Where's our programming going to be? On the 2nd floor with space for the community on the 1st floor, again, modeled after your design. I wanted to talk about how the NJC is the court leader in technology, but I'll just mention the ways before this family violence intervention order, which I'm going to talk about. You always had that YouTube video, which was Louise, I know what you wrote, that video. I think it's just the coolest thing. I was watching it again this morning. It makes people understand what's going to happen in court. It reduces the stress. It reduces the anxiety. It just makes everything easier to understand. I remember people giving a court or given an iPad with their case information, told when the case is going to be called. You're showing your respect to the people coming into the courthouse. I did some research. Reno, Nevada, and the Dallas courts are looking at a simplified version of this app, a very simple version. That's all we could do at this point, to send court reminders and information to court users. You're so far ahead of us. But I have to tell you, your family violence intervention order that's online is, it literally changes everything. And there's no question in my mind that this is going global. So this is going to truly make you a leader in such an important field. And it's going to help victims, not only where you are locally, not only across your country, but it's going to help victims around the world. This is going to go throughout courts everywhere. This is truly ingenious, truly amazing, truly special. I have to tell you that. So you're far and away. And by the way, your website happens to be the envy of all the other community courts, but you're truly leading the way. I wanted it to end by asking everyone on this Zoom to sometime walk in the front door of the Neighborhood Justice Center if you haven't done so. Recently, in a presentation, Professor Sarah Murray talked about doing just that. She said that instead of a long line to get past security, she was asked if she wanted some tea, and she was taken aback, and then she was asked again. So what does this simple gesture say to anyone entering? It says welcome. It says we respect you. It says we care about you. It says you are part of our community. You will have a voice and be part of what happens today. It says we want to help. Let's work together to address whatever you came to court for today. And as she noted, this approach continues not just there, but right throughout the entire building. Not only the design, not only where things are, not only the services, but it's in the people, in the building, to treat people in this manner. And this is procedural justice. And while it's the way I believe people should be treated, it's also been studied. You can look at studied by Professor Murray, by Professor Tom Tyler, and Professor Tracy Mears. And it works to reduce crime. So it's not only just the right thing to do, just a nice thing to do, but it works to reduce crime when people are part of the solution and treated with respect in the process. When they're treated with respect in the process, they treat the process with respect. They have respect for the process. And it doesn't make a difference whether you're from Melbourne, Western Australia, South Australia, Queensland, the UK, Red Hook, obviously I've learned from it, Singapore, Vietnam, Cambodia, Canada, Holland, just some of the places that have looked to the NJC as a model. This is what people everywhere want from their court system. This is what justice reformers and law schools and law professors are looking for in their court system. Not courts that intimidate and incarcerate, but courts that work with the individual to identify and address the underlying issue that brought the offender to court. And you're reducing crime, reducing recidivism, and reducing incarceration. They want courts that give people the tools to be successful, courts that respect the community, raising the community's trust in justice. At the Neighborhood Justice Center, it starts right at their front door. Thank you very much.
Judge, that was amazing. And we'll start with some questions.
I think, yeah, there's a few answers to that question, quite a few elements to it. I think Richard said it well in his presentation that driving innovation in courts is not a simple business, and getting something like an NJC up off the ground is really complex. We've had Rob Hulls speak at one of our speaker series online talking to that issue and all the sort of political and strategic alignment he needed to get underway to establish the centre, and what a feat that was. So I think in the history of change in justice, the centre is really still quite young. So, you know, if you look at the amount of time it took for things like the drug court to be replicated, and in some ways that's much more of a predefined package. So it's easier for people to envisage what that's going to look like in another location. Whereas with a neighbourhood justice centre, it's not going to look, a community justice centre approach, it's not going to look exactly the same in other locations. So it's more of a model and an approach rather than it must look like this. So I think sometimes it's been harder for people to grasp. And also it's about having the right political will at the time. We got very close with South Australia, then there was a change of government, same with Queensland, and probably the strongest momentums in Western Australia at the moment. But I think also the questions about why the centre as a whole hasn't been replicated kind of overlook the influence the model has had. And maybe in the early days, that was what we were looking to see replicated. But as Judge Calabrese's outlined, it's been more about the influence of our approaches and practices and how that's been adopted. We still might see replication down the track, and we'd love to see that. But I think things like, say, the centre's influence on, you know, community corrections orders and judicial monitoring under them, that came from, you know, some inspiration from processes here. So it's sort of the tentacles have reached out in many directions. And then likewise, we've taken it back from other centres as well. So, but perhaps Judge Calabrese, do you want to add to that?
Sure. A couple of things. Some of our practices, we were originally seen as an experimental court, and some of our practices were taken into the main courthouse, especially what we call, what they took as supervised release, which allowed a significant amount of people to be released pre-trial while they were doing, while they're under supervision, rather than be sitting at Rikers Island waiting for their case. It was, the amount was so much that that's what they really looked to citywide to when they're talking about closing down Rikers Island, or, you know, our jail, which is unfortunately so well known, not for good reason. It's interesting, during the pandemic, surprisingly, a couple things that happened. And this is what I said, that courts, you hear about courts a lot of times after they've been created. It was my understanding that 2 courts were opened up in the Netherlands, and they're going to open up Amsterdam in September. And I didn't even know that they were going forward. I just assumed that the pandemic had kind of slowed that down, and then this pandemic is going to, got budget issues all over the place and may slow down the movement. At the same time, I heard that the Ukraine had moved from 3. I was actually, myself and CCI members, people were over in the Ukraine, and they had a solid court, a court that was going okay, and one that I wasn't really sure was going to make it. And the last I heard was that they've got 6 courts now, most of them linked with, 6 community justice centers, most of them linked with courts. And we're going to find out in a couple of weeks how they're doing, but they've moved from 3 to 6. So I think what happens is also local. I think your neighborhood county has a court, and like Spokane had a court. In Olympia, Washington, the sheriff looked at it and said, that court is really helping reduce warrants and helping improve the justice system. So even the sheriff wanted one. The thing about community courts, as you well know, is that all the different community court players or participants have reasons for wanting a community court. So you've got, you've got district attorneys in somewhere, sheriffs in other areas, defense lawyers in other areas, communities. Detroit, Southwest Detroit Community Court was literally started by citizens when they read about community courts. So you've got so many different people seeing the benefits of it. And then when you have evaluations like the NJC, like Red Hook, and all these other courts that's showing, by the way, it saves money in the end, it's really hard to say no to. So that combination really is continuing. And now you've got criminal justice reform. Now you've got reformers. And what are they looking for from the courts? Courts that treat people with respect, courts that work with communities. In places, courts that are going to figure out the role of police in the community. It's going to be court, community, and police working together with maybe the courts helping the communities work with the police and try to figure out, how do we want our police locally to act? Because that's going to be a local decision for us here in the United States. So there's a real tailwind behind community courts and the principles underlying community courts. And so whether it's court set up, whether it's our principles taken, whether it's that family violence intervention order, which again is not only going to sweep your country, that's going global. That's just amazing. You get so much out of community courts, and I think if anything, they're just going to spread.
Yeah, I might just add to that too, Chris, that one thing I forgot to mention was with new court and justice centre developments in Victoria, like Bendigo and Wyndham, people designing those new courts always come to us really to, among others, but to look to NJC Experience and how it's managed to get those results, how it's done community engagement and in their planning and development, and also the courtroom and centre design, such as Judge Calabrese mentioned, and also how going about innovation and that work. So I think back when we started the online family violence intervention order form, user experience was not a term that was used in courts at all. But now, and I think Richard would back me up on this, it's just, part of business as usual to have that as part of the lexicon. So sometimes influence is hard to track, but I guess what NJC probably does best is that demonstration, and then sometimes that's adopted in as courts modernise.
Basically all of the courts at the beginning of the pandemic were closed and went virtual. We went virtual along with our court system very quickly, and can do virtual arraignments. Amazingly, we have found that services work virtually, counseling works virtually. We're able to get people into drug programs. I'm sure other courts have the same experience where people are appearing in court virtually from their home, but also from their car, sometimes walking down the street, sometimes from their homeless shelter, but they're doing what they can to appear in court. And when they appear, even though Red Hook, like the NJC, is a place of where people, it's clear we want to help people. We're not looking to incarcerate, et cetera. But when people appear, from their home or their car or anything, they seem to participate even more. They seem to be more open and honest about their issues that they're dealing with. And obviously that's where treatment starts, right? When they talk about what their issues are, and they can tell you truthfully how much help they need. So it works. We also, Amanda Berman and our HRC team, our housing team, have been doing wellness checks and literally calling tenants. And they opened up an office in the Red Hook houses, which does take walk-ins. So we're staying in touch with our community, but our doors are still closed. We're hoping that they open soon, but we're able to deliver a lot of services. Now, someone also asked about that financial hardship program. I am very concerned about when we open housing court. Yes, people will be able to get repairs, but at the same time, people will be required to pay rent. And if they're behind in rent, the only thing the landlord does is threaten them with eviction, the landlord being the New York City. And I'm very concerned about the high percentage of people and families who are behind in rent because of the pandemic. So the getting in touch with their finances, getting in control with their finances, being able to figure out how in the future, because they're always given time to pay their rent. So how can I do this? All of this, the financial hardship program helps them with all of this. It helps them with budgeting. It helps them get control of it. Helps them figure out how they're going to handle this significant issue, and also helps them figure out, okay, well, if I can't get help from here, I can get help from these other places, because that's part of our package. Obviously, is dealing with human resources, services, welfare, et cetera. But also, okay, maybe I need to change careers. I can't get that job again. And where can I get training? Where can I get help? So it's a complete package that we bring to them. And again, the inception was the NJC.
Thank you for the question. So just in terms of adoption of technology adoption in the courts, in May last year, the Magistrates Court of Victoria stood up an online Magistrates Court service, that is virtual court hearings, as the primary method of delivering court services across 2020. Clearly as a response to the pandemic, but also as a general practice change as well. And it's been a huge change for court administration. And it's been a huge change for the judiciary. Government has recently indicated a desire to embed this model into the court's practices beyond the pilot type approach that we started with last May into a full system and service offering. So virtual hearings are here to stay and even expanded. And this is one way we believe we can improve access to justice across Victoria, particularly being regional and rural centres, and be able to offer that online service, rather than expecting people to jump in the car and drive X number of kilometres to the local court. Supporting this is planning to establish an e-registry for the handling of documents online. It sounds obvious, but as you know, court practices can be slow to change, but we're committed to building upon our online service offering, expanding both the online Magistrates Court, expanding the e-registry, and really improving access to justice for all Victorians, regardless of where you live.
Well, can't say climate justice is my area, but my thoughts would be that, yeah, if there's the political will behind it and the backing, I don't see why not. And I expect there would be some living lab style organisations in the climate justice field. I'm not aware of them, but it's tended to be an area that's been very innovative. So I would expect there to be something around that.
Similarly, the Magistrates Court hasn't got anything underway at the moment around climate justice or responding to climate justice issues, but we'd look to some of our justice centres, and particularly the Neighbourhood Justice Centre and other leading justice innovation centres to work through that but we don't have anything at the moment.
And I would add too that we're always open and curious about any ideas people have for innovations we can work on. It's not all about us coming up with ideas. We sort of borrow from wherever we can, and wherever there's a good idea, we're willing to look at it. So do send any of those kind of ideas through to us.
Yeah, absolutely. So shall I say, a sister online application form for personal safety has been built.
Awesome.
And it's in the final throes of testing. I don't believe it's gone live yet. No, but it's imminent. So a number of improvements and enhancements around the introduction of a personal safety online application form, ability to redeclare, so the back and forth that can happen where applications may need to be adapted slightly, can all happen online. So some of these initiatives, expansion and service enhancement opportunities are being worked in the back corners of the Magistrates Court at the moment, and we'll be looking to release those later this year.
Thank you so much. Well, I will wish everyone well with the rest of their Monday or Sunday night if they're signing in from the East Coast of the US. Thank you again, everyone, for attending, and please go and check out the Victorian Law Week website for more events that are happening throughout the week. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.